collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up on this week's programme, despite the holiday restrictions for COVID, the Christmas mountain villages will go ahead.
We wanted to focus more on traditional type of Christmas, the romanticism of Christmas in our mountain regions.
Cyprus and Italy have connections going back centuries, many of them documented at the Centre for Visual Arts and Research, whose founder has been recognised by the Italian Foreign Ministry.
Very strong connections and very long connections. I mean, we can think of the last Queen of Cyprus, Caterina Cornaro, but also of the many people like Costanzo Davila that lived in Cyprus and built the bastions of Nicosia.
And a new special advisor to the UN Secretary-General has arrived on the island, but before leaving Cyprus, his predecessor addressed a conference in Nicosia.
We do not have to, and we should not, wait to solve the Cyprus problem to put such policies for gender equality into place on this island.
We keep being warned that things at Christmas may change because of the pandemic situation. However, the Deputy Tourism Ministry is going ahead with its Christmas villages in the mountains. Some things, however, have changed. To tell us all about it, it's welcome back to the programme to the Deputy Minister of Tourism, Savas Perdios. Savas, first of all, let's say what is going to be happening, and then let's talk about the changes that you've had to make.
Rosie, thanks for having me once again. Basically, we are going ahead to a large extent as planned. The villages, they start on the 10th of December in 5 communities of the mountain regions, and they will go on until the 6th of January, so that's a full 4 weeks, which is great. I'm very happy about that. We have excluded, and to be frank, this decision was taken much before the latest decisions of the Ministry of Health. We decided about a month ago that we would be excluding things like choirs with a lot of people, or singing, dancing, street food, which causes the congregation of a lot of people. We felt that we wanted to do something a little bit different. There will not be children play areas or Luna parks, things that you will probably find in cities, etc. We wanted to focus more on traditional type of Christmas, the romanticism of Christmas in our mountain regions. So obviously we have paid a lot of attention to the Christmas decorations, the lighting, music, and the Christmas carols through the speakers. We have our wooden huts or wooden little houses, which will be selling traditional handicrafts, not only traditional but also modern actually. They will also be selling traditional local products food-wise, but these will be for consumption at home. Nothing is going to be consumed in the street as such, because as I said, we want to avoid excessive congregation of people from a street food sense. We will have also a lot of workshops, handicraft workshops and gastronomy workshops in these 5 villages. By reservation in advance, we will have walks through the villages, tours of the villages, hikes, biking routes. So I think it's going to be a different type of Christmas, experiential, and it's not only about these 5 villages, it's also about the rest of the communities, the neighboring communities around them, because let's not forget that the domestic tourism scheme is running until the end of March, which means that the nearby communities or neighboring communities, they are all within this plan. There's a lot of hotels and agro-tourism establishments within the scheme taking part, so there's a lot of accommodation available. And also, another part of what we have done, we've got a list of every restaurant in the wider mountain region of Cyprus, neighboring also to these villages, that are going to be offering something special for Christmas, whether that's visit not only the 5 villages per se, but the wider region as a whole. This was our intention, not to have people go only to these 5 communities, but the wider region as a whole. So I think that's what's going to happen.
I'm very confused, though, about this no food in the streets business, because people are going to be allowed, as you said, to go to restaurants and cafes and things, and surely it's much safer if there is a pandemic ongoing to eat your food in the open air as you wander around.
Yeah, but this is not something we can control, and that's ultimately the major factor in our decision. We said that, at least in restaurants and coffee shops, it's possible to control the maximum number of people. It's easier to control the safe pass, etc., and keep the protocols. And our staff is going to be doing a lot of checking up on these businesses to make sure that the protocols are being followed, whereas if we're talking about street food in the middle of the street, it's much more difficult to control the total number of people, and we don't want to create a concept where it's going to be closed up, in the streets and people not being able to wander around. And if we had to allow food in the streets, then that would mean reducing the number of people at any given moment, whereas we want people to feel free to walk up and down the villages. So we had a decision to make, and this is the decision we've taken. We feel that it's the safest, and I think it shows a good intent from our side in terms of supporting also the local businesses. Our intention was never to open our own food and beverage outlets in the streets at the expense of people avoiding restaurants or hotels and the local businesses. We know that a lot of businesses have been waiting for the Christmas in order to work or be a bit busier. So it's also something that we want to be very careful about.
Are you going to therefore limit the number of people who can be wandering around at any given time, by the sound of it? How are you going to do that?
No, we will not. We will not, because it's a street, There's no restriction on walking in the street, whether we're talking about Nicosia or Larnaca or any place. From the moment that people can move freely around, this is exactly how it's going to be for us as well.
So they won't have to show a safe pass just to walk around the streets?
No, absolutely not. I mean, obviously, we want everybody to wear a mask. That's anyway something that we have to be doing, but walking in the street would not require a safe pass.
So where can people find the details of all of this, Savas?
We have a website, cyprusvillages.com. Also on our main website, visit cyprus.com. And all the information is on there, both in terms of the protocols, also in terms of what type of experiences are going to be available, the program, the workshops, the handicraft workshops, etc.
So they'll be up and running from today, and you can find all the details on those websites. Our thanks to Savas Perdios, Deputy Minister of Tourism, for telling us about the Christmas villages in the mountains.
Listen online to the Cyprus News Digest on YouTube or at cyprusmail.libsyn.com. The latest program is uploaded every Friday, and if you missed one, you can catch up there.
Earlier this week, I was back at our old friend the CVAR in Old Nicosia, where the founder, Rita Severis, was given a very special award. To tell us all about it, we welcome both her and the Italian ambassador to Nicosia, shortly to leave our islands, but this was quite, I think, for him, an important thing to do before he left. So, Andrea Cavallari, Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about this award.
Good evening. The Order of Stella d'Italia is a decoration which has been introduced by the Republic of Italy to recognize the special duties that Italians or foreigners are doing in promoting the Italian culture and Italian language abroad.
Rita, you have a lot of Italian, I was going to say stuff, I don't know, there's so much of it and it's so different, but the museum does have a great Italian input.
Yes.
So this is obviously very well deserved. What's your take as a historian on the connection between Cyprus and Italy?
Very strong connections and very long connections. I mean, we can think of the last Queen of Cyprus, Caterina Cornaro, but also of the many people like Costanzo Davila that lived in Cyprus and built the bastions of Nicosia. We've got monuments, Italian monuments. We've got even descendants of those Italians that lived in Cyprus during the Middle Ages. We still have some. And of course, the presence of Italy is very strong through the Latin community on the island. So, yes, and the museum does have a lot of paintings.
Do you have a particular favourite piece that you would say, in a sense, belongs to Italy?
Well, what else than Caterina Cornaro, huh? Of course, the room of Caterina Cornaro is very, very special for me. And especially one painting of Caterina when she left and went to Asolo, where she's portrayed wearing Cypriot clothes, the saya and the alaja, and holding an apple. Now, the apple is very symbolic because it is the apple that Paris gave to Queen Aphrodite as the most beautiful of the goddesses of Olympus. And of course, the artist gave the apple to the best and most beautiful of the queens of Cyprus, to Caterina Cornaro.
Andrea, if we come back to you, you obviously, as a diplomat, knew quite a lot about the connections between Cyprus and Italy before you came, but I suspect your support for the CVAR over these years has maybe given you a new window into some of those connections. What stands out for you?
You are very right. Knowing Rita Severis, visiting the museum here, the center, has been for me a fantastic journey through the relation that exists between Italy and Cyprus. Rita was mentioning Caterina Cornaro. I coming from Italy, it's not so easy to find people knowing about what exactly was Caterina Cornaro and how much she was in the heart of Cypriot people and what remained of her legacy in the island today. So I think that Italy as a country and the Republic of Italy, through this decoration that has been awarded to Rita Severis, is recognizing the role that this institution, this cultural institution, the CVAR, and personally Rita is doing to enhance the relation that existed and still exists between the two countries.
And the understanding, Rita, of people who live or indeed visit Cyprus to those connections. Caterina Cornaro was a tragic figure, wasn't she?
Yes, of course she was tragic because she was forced to leave the island, an island whose people loved her. They really loved her, and she loved the Cypriots as well. But you know, it's not only Caterina. There were a lot of people that came to Cyprus and loved Cyprus. I was lucky enough to be given a manuscript of the 18th century of somebody called Namindieu, who I believe is the same person as Mariti. And I was helped by Monsieur Perrault, who translated it from the Italian to English, and then I annotated it and worked on it. And we brought out this wonderful travelogue that is full of new information about the island in the 18th century, which you cannot find anywhere else. And it's amazing. This was an Italian that gave us all this information, somebody from Tuscany. And apart from him, of course, we have Mariti, who wrote about the wines of Cyprus, which are very, very important. And so many other travelers that came to Cyprus and spoke about this land and made it known abroad. It's important for us. These links with Italy are very, very important for us.
Why did they come to Cyprus? Was it en route to the Middle East, or did they come to visit Cyprus?
Well, don't forget that Cyprus belonged to Venice for so many years. So in a way, they came to see an old colony, to visit an old colony. Of course, there were the pilgrims that went to the Holy Land and stopped for a short period in Cyprus. But there were people that came purposely, being influenced by the fact that once upon a time we were a Venetian state. And there were also people that came here during the middle of the 19th century that were archaeologists that came to see the monuments and to work on the monuments.
And traders, of course.
Of course, traders, of course, especially in the older times we had, Cyprus was a trading post, yes. And most of the consuls that were in Cyprus were Italian. We say that we have consuls from the Ionian Islands. Well, yes, but the Ionian Islands belonged to Italy at the time. So they were Italian, they spoke Italian, they brought in the Italian fashions and norms and ideas.
We've been talking there to Dr. Rita Severis, who's just been awarded, courtesy of the Foreign Ministry of Italy, on the recommendation of their ambassador, His Excellency Andrea Cavallari, the Stella d'Italia, a great honour. And if you haven't yet been to the CVAR, well, there's a feast waiting for you there. Visit it over the Christmas holidays.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
A new special advisor to the United Nations Secretary General has arrived on the island. But before leaving Cyprus, after 5 years here, his predecessor, Elizabeth Spehar, addressed a conference in Nicosia. She covered not just the Cyprus problem, but societal matters as well. This is what she had to say.
It's more than ever evident that the status quo is not static, and that the situation on the island and in the region is in flux. This leads to the question as to whether in Cyprus itself there is peace. We can say that the situation is relatively peaceful, as in there is an absence of war. But Cyprus is not at peace, since the conflict persists. If anything, the past many months without substantive talks have been accompanied by a deepening mistrust between the parties. This leads to another question. Can security prevail and economic prosperity flourish on a perpetually divided island? Many people on the island share these concerns. They've told me so. They come from different walks of life. However, it's also true that so many others seem indifferent to the Cyprus issue here on the island, or have simply lost hope. They shouldn't. We all must keep hope alive, but not simply with words. We need to keep hope alive, more importantly, with actions. The UN has worked on supporting countries around the world to achieve peace, and will continue to do so in Cyprus, and is committed to not only helping to attain, but also sustain peace. Sustaining peace is an all-encompassing concept that is very central to the work of the United Nations. And among other elements, this concept of sustaining peace acknowledges that peace can be fragile, even once it's achieved. Sustaining peace also emphasizes that achieving peace is a shared task and a responsibility that needs to be fulfilled not just by the official negotiators engaged in a formal process, but also by all local stakeholders, women, youth, business leaders, and civil society at large. We believe that it's not only about the geopolitics of the region, it's also about what goes on between the people on the island. Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots share many basic concerns. Since the start of the pandemic, those concerns have further grown, particularly in the economic field and in terms of safety and health related to COVID-19. There are particularly alarming statistics from the Turkish Cypriot economy. This could also be bad news for the south. Make no mistake, this is not leverage over the north. It's increasing and further creating a yawning gap between the two economies that could yet be another obstacle to peace. The current socioeconomic and political situation may further deteriorate. Both North and South continue to drift further apart, and so do their respective economies. Such changes only narrow the options for solving the Cyprus issue. Considering all of the above, how can we move forward? What opportunities can nonetheless be seized? Let me point out a few of them. I think it's important to remind us that all parties have stated their desire for and their willingness to pursue a politically negotiated solution. This is important. In parallel to this, while I did underline the deepening mistrust between the parties, there still are incentives out there for all parties to consider seriously re-engaging. We can work on this, which might provide the necessary mutual reassurances among the parties to restart a process. Although we may not realize it here, unlike many other conflict scenarios, the UN Security Council is unified in its support for a comprehensive settlement in Cyprus. This consistent support of the United Nations Security Council is a strength. And despite the current difficulties, as our Secretary General has made clear, the UN Secretariat and he personally are not giving up on Cyprus, and we will continue to work with the parties to find a way back to the negotiating table. The offer of an envoy to facilitate such discussions is still out there. It needs to be seized by all parties. The European Union has also recently refocused on Cyprus and the region. This is also good news. They also have a critical role to play, including in support of UN-facilitated efforts. In this process, in fact, we believe that everyone has a part to play. It's a fact that Cypriots, people on this island, have democratic agency. Therefore, they can and they should encourage and support the leaderships here to resolve the Cyprus problem in a way that serves their best collective interests. But one could ask, is there a common vision on the way forward and on the way to achieve this? Perhaps it has to be built, and if so, it will have to be built also from the ground up. But make no mistake, this is not a job for a few. Everyone has a stake in this. Building a sustainable settlement in Cyprus, we believe, will require more collaboration, cooperation, and interaction between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots on the island, but also in the broader region. It's important to remember that despite the current negative rhetoric and polarized positions, it is still possible to have some positive movement in areas which are improving the daily lives of Cypriots. The technical committees, which bring together Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot experts under the auspices of the leaders, are vehicles for this and demonstrate that the sides can still agree on a number of important issues, and they can make things happen. Even in the current environment, it's critical, in my view, to keep the thread of dialogue between the sides intact, and the committees are also playing this role. The COVID-19 pandemic has severely tested countries and societies across the globe. the Secretary General made an appeal early in the pandemic to ask all those in conflict around the world to find ways to pause their grievances in order to focus on the common enemy, that is the virus. Here in Cyprus, there has been medical and humanitarian support across the divide. More could certainly be done to address the economic and social fallout of the pandemic. Successive reports of the Secretary General have called for, and I quote, efforts to achieve greater economic and social parity between the two sides and to broaden and deepen economic, cultural, and other forms of cooperation. The Secretary General's reports have also pointed out, and again I quote from the last report, the full implementation of European Council Regulation number 866/2004, otherwise known as the Green Line Regulation, would help significantly to increase the volume of trade and should be pursued with renewed vigor, unquote. This reminds us that a viable and sustainable peace does not occur in a vacuum. The foundations for it need to continuously be built. People all over the island have many of the same concerns. I mentioned this a moment ago. They have similar economic, social concerns. They're worried about the state of the environment. Common challenges can bring people together, and then perhaps that can lead to a better conversation about the benefits and the urgent need for a settlement, the need to get it done. In a recent collaboration with the World Bank, the Good Office's mission in Cyprus produced and disseminated a socioeconomic impact assessment of a potential settlement deal, which outlined the clear case for settlement to pave the way for greater stability and economic prosperity. It also talked about the losses, the lost opportunities, if this is not done. I would welcome the attention of the business community to this assessment, and I would like to hear their thoughts on how we can already build the foundations for this. One prominent angle of the assessment makes the case for working, as of now, on both sides to increase gender parity in the contributions to and the rewards of greater economic development. The whole island stands to gain if women participate in the labor force at the same rate as men. Addressing limitations on women and adopting appropriate policies in this respect, as of now, would unlock new opportunities. And therefore, within a settlement, it will not just be about maximizing potential benefits or having a bigger pie, but also ensuring that the benefits flow equally to men and women. More flexible and affordable childcare policies, for example, and bridging the financial literacy gender gap have been proven to be effective, and I quote, growth and prosperity accelerators, unquote, around the world. We do not have to, and we should not, wait to solve the Cyprus problem to put such policies for gender equality into place on this island. We're now here only a few days after the closing of the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow that focused on taking action to address the world's looming environmental and climate crisis. Small islands are particularly vulnerable, and Cyprus needs to be having this conversation island-wide. At UNFICYP, we've been supporting young Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots to do exactly that. They are very keen to bring their concerns and their ideas to the leaders. Let me conclude by quoting Secretary General Antonio Guterres' remarks in Glasgow at COP26 just a few days ago. And I quote, "Let us choose ambition, choose solidarity, choose to safeguard our future." This resonates for me in the broader Cyprus context as well. I thank you.
The former Special Advisor to the United Nations Secretary General on the island, Elizabeth Speha. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.